Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Mech Sorcerer, but we are also going to briefly touch on Mech Infiltrator as well, so you have a brief understanding about how to play that too. Mech Sorcerer is a really fun build. It is a build that less people build overall than I think some of the top tier builds that you see out there. And I think it's a build that is criminally underrated. I think it's got some very strong components to it, and with the right items can beat a lot of other builds in the game. So I think Mech Sorcerer is definitely a build that you should have in your repertoire. So we're going to talk over it in a bit of detail. We're going to go through a little cheat sheet for Mech Sorcerer, and then we're going to have a look at some actual sort of early game to mid game to late game build advice, and then we're going to go through some of the game that you're seeing on your screen right now. So, Mech Sorcerer / Infiltrator. Well, obviously your core champions across both of these are your mechs, which is Annie, Rumble, and Fizz. And then you can see below that the two forms of teams are either going to be the Zoe, Ahri, Syndra, Lux, and Vel'Koz for the Sorcerer composition, because then you get 6 Sorcerers with Annie. Or you're going to be running Kai'Sa, Shaco, Kayle or Misfortune, but obviously with 3 legendaries it's a little bit harder, Echo and Gangplank as the main form of the Mech Infiltrator composition. It's a little bit harder to build the late game Mech Infiltrator, but also has win conditions through Shaco and Kai'Sa where you don't necessarily need the Echo and the Gangplank to make it work. In terms of Mech Sorcerer, you are looking for tiers, needs large rods, and obviously a chain vest won't go amiss if you're trying to find yourself a GA, BF sword as well. But realistically, for the most part, tiers and rods are going to be your primary source of kind of like item income on the carousels, because you're looking for a Rabadons, you're looking for a Seraphs, a Jeweled Gauntlet. Ionic Spark will work really well for the mech, but GA is good for the mech too, as is Warmogs. When it comes to Mech Infiltrator, then you are looking for primarily BF swords, chain vests, sparring gloves or brawler's gloves, and obviously you want to get yourself a GA and you want to get yourself an Infinity Edge. 2 GAs in this composition is really good, one for the mech and one for Shaco, and obviously Infinity Edge is a really important item for Shaco overall. So these are the 2 major types of compositions that you can build with mechs. I personally prefer Sorcerers because less people contest them, but Mech Infiltrators is a very powerful build. If you can get the Shaco and the Kai'Sa rolling early on, they can pretty much solo carry the mid game, so they're also very powerful, and I would recommend trying to give that composition a go too. Hey guys, so we're going to be going through Mech Sorcerer starting with the early game, and actually it's one of the easier compositions to get online in the early game because you can go Star Guardians pretty easily. So what I like to try and do is pick up a Poppy, and then I like to have a Zoe. Both of them are 1 costs, and then you can very easily find an Ahri. So there you go, you have your 3 Star Guardians and 2 Sorcerers already unlocked. Zoe and Ahri are going to benefit each other, and then you can essentially pop off with these guys. Then obviously, as you are going towards level 4, you're going to want to try and find an Annie. Annie is obviously going to be someone that you're going to add into the composition. She's a sorcerer as well, so she will benefit. She can go at the front if you want, somewhere like that. But you're giving yourself the Star Guardian with the Annie very early on. Now, the point of a mech composition is pretty quickly to get to level 6 so that you can find Fizz. You essentially need to find Annie, Fizz, and Rumble as quickly as possible. If any of you are wondering what you would do with items that you get in the early game, either to give to your mechs, well, obviously you can give Annie the items that you intend to have on the mech very early on. So for instance, if you find a Warmogs or an Ionic Spark, Annie can have those, especially if you get her to level 2 early on, because she's just going to go into the mech eventually anyway. You know, something like a GA, an Ionic Spark, and a Warmogs is like a really good setup. Obviously, it's very unlikely that you find all of these, but any one of these items is really good for Annie in the early game. So obviously, she's going to be the one that you're aiming to get to 3-star when you're playing the mechs anyway. But yeah, that's kind of how I look to play the early game. However, if I don't have anyone to hold the items for Syndra, what I could do is I could drop at level 5 someone like a Ezreal. Where is he? Where's my boy Ezreal? You could drop someone like an Ezreal in, and if you have the items for Syndra, you can give the items for Syndra to someone like an Ezreal. So let's say you can give him a Seraphs and a Rabadons. He's got a very powerful mid-game sort of burst damage, so you can give Ezreal these items, and then you eventually sell him for the Syndra. So what we're going to do now is, so this is level 4, maybe level 5 if you've got the Ezreal. If you find the Syndra, of course, just give the items to the Syndra. She's obviously the same rank as Ezreal, so if you find the items for Syndra, you obviously just drop the items on the Syndra. You get her to level 2 as quickly as possible. You don't need to really think about the Poppy, but obviously Poppy sells for the same amount of gold that you invest into her. If you put her at level 2, that's perfectly fine. So the aim that you want to have at level 6 is, let's get rid of Poppy. So at level 6, you desperately want to have a Rumble and a Fizz. The reason being, obviously, is that you want to have your mech spawning. You really need to have your mech online as quickly as possible. If you have this setup somewhere around level 6, you're going to have 4 sorcerers and 3 star guardians with the Syndra as well, and 3 mech pilots. This is like the perfect level 6 that you're aiming for if you're playing Mech Sorcerer. There are 2 ways to play mech items. If you're not looking to get Annie to 3 star, you can actually separate some items out and give some to Fizz and get him to 2 star. But realistically, what you should be doing is, as a priority, level 6, you are rolling specifically for your mechs, and specifically to try and get Annie to 3 star. Annie should be your 3 star mech, then Rumble, and obviously Fizz is less likely to get 3 starred. But Annie should be the one that you're looking to 3 star out of your lineup. In terms of sorcerers, you're going to want to try and 3 star the Syndra, of course. She's your main carry. Zoe is pretty irrelevant. Ari's a decent 3 star, but she's not fantastic. And obviously now we want to head towards having 6 sorcerers. So to complete our 6 sorcerer lineup, we're going to want to have Lux, who you usually throw in a corner somewhere. And then you're going to want to have Vel'Koz. And Vel'Koz will just sit in the middle. I actually think Vel'Koz is one of the worst 4 costs in the game. But nonetheless, this is your overall composition at level 8. And then at level 9, what you're going to want to do is, if I can find him, probably throw a Gangplank in. You could probably put him behind a mech. You could put him up with the mech somewhere, like here. But yeah, you want to throw a Gangplank in because Rumble's a demolitionist, so is Gangplank. And so if you find any spare items, so for instance, if you've got like a spare Morellonomicon going, where is Morellonomicon? It's not very good on Syndra. It's okay on Vel'Koz, but it's not very good on Syndra. But it's also really good on Gangplank, so you could just throw that on Gangplank and that'll be perfectly fine. So that would be my level 9 composition for this. If you are playing Mech Infiltrators, it works a little bit differently. Obviously, the mechs stay the same, but Mech Infiltrators, obviously, you want to, early game, find Kai'Sa, and you want to find Shaco, wherever Shaco is. So you want Kai'Sa and Shaco, and both of these guys are your 3 star. These are both 3 stars. Both of them can take items. Shaco is best with something like an Infinity Edge and a Guardian Angel. Kai'Sa works really well with a Rabadon's Death Cap, and also with... she works fine with the GA as well. Seraph's works really well on Kai'Sa too. And obviously then you want to try and add in the Valkyrie bonus. Now you could do that with a Misfortune, but you have so many legendaries in this composition anyway. It's probably best just adding a Kale. And then you want to finish this comp off with the Gangplank for the Demolitionist bonus. You want to give him some items as well. And you also want to finish it off with the Echo to make sure you've got all of the infiltrators, and that would be your total composition with the Mech Infiltrators. But I've been playing Mech Sorcerer, so we're going to focus on Mech Sorcerer in this game. But there are 2 ways to play mechs. Mech Infiltrator is usually seen as the best option, but Mech Sorcerer is very powerful too. Alright, let's take a look at the early game now that I was playing this Mech Sorcerer composition with. Started off very early on by finding a 2-star Zoe, and also had a Ziggs and Poppy, so I had a pair of Ziggs and a pair of Poppies coming out into the first PvP round. Now this is not exactly the strongest comp to come straight out of the PvP round with, but finding a 2-star Ziggs sets me up pretty nicely here as well. And then we just need to find something like an Ari or a Syndra, or to get the Star Guardian bonus going, and also to throw the Sorcerers on as well. So I think right now I have some items that would be good for Syndra. I'm going to throw one onto Ziggs because obviously Ziggs benefits from having critical strikes on his ability because he does a lot of damage, a lot of single target damage. So Ziggs is a pretty good item holder as well for Syndra, especially if you're not going to get rid of him early on. So we've got a pretty good setup here. If I find a 2-star Poppy, which I do, and an Ari, and hit level 4, this is basically ideal for me when it comes to doing Mech Sorcerer. Mech Sorcerer. If I wanted to do Mech Infiltrator, I could have taken the Shaco here and sold off a couple of things on my bench. Now, you might wonder why I gave that tier to Ahri. I'm going to tell you, complete mistake. I thought Ahri was Syndra. I actually genuinely thought Ahri was Syndra for some reason this game. And actually, one of the big mistakes that I had this game was the fact that I had to sell an Ahri. I ended up just stacking the Ahri because I was like, well, I've put an item on her now. I ended up having to sell the Ahri later on and get another 2-star Ahri onto the field. I still managed to do well in this game. I still won, but that was a big mistake. Don't give your items to Ahri. What I would have been better off doing there is just giving the tier to Ziggs to eventually then sell. Could have given it to an Ezreal as well if I didn't have a chance to get a Ziggs, but you can just give the items to Ziggs for the early game to generate a win streak and then sell him and give them to the Syndra eventually as well. I end up getting a 2-star Xayah here. Now, this is actually a good reason for me to go to level 5, because with all of these 2 stars on the board, plus the synergies that I've already got, I can actually generate a pretty solid win streak here. So I actually ended up doing really well, and by the time we got to 3-5, I was level 6, and as I said, most important thing you can do at this level is no matter what, get that mech on the field, and I was able to get the Fizz very early on here too. You can see I've got a very stacked Ahri at this point in time. Now, what I do to transition out of the Ahri having the items is I eventually wait until I get a 2-star Syndra, and then when I get a 2-star Syndra, I sell the Ahri and give the items over to Syndra, but only when I find another Ahri as well. So it was a little bit yikes from me, but actually Ahri is a good mid-game carry anyway. You can see she's doing a lot of damage with her orb. The only problem is that she doesn't have the ramp-up potential like a Syndra has, and eventually in the late game you're going to need the Syndra because she has that one-shot capability, and you need the items to be able to do that as well. But nonetheless, we were still perfectly fine. We were still on a really good win streak. You can see we're at 94 HP. So by giving our items to Ziggs and over to Ahri, we actually generated a very good mid-game win streak, which has been going very well so far. Now that I actually found the Fizz, there are 2 ways to play this from this point forward. I either hyper roll, just looking for as many units as I can get for my particular composition. So for instance, I want to get a 2-star Ziggs, I want to get a 2-star Rumble, I want a 2-star Annie, or I'm going to start looking for as many, I'm going to start leveling up as much as I can to get towards level 7 and level 8 so I can get the 6 sorcerers on. There are 2 ways to play it. I think actually going for the 3 stars, so the 3-star Syndra, the 3-star Annie is usually better. Also, obviously, I could pick up a 3-star Zoe, as you see. But in this case, I didn't actually find the 3-star Annie, so you'll notice that I actually leveled up pretty early on here. Also, the fact that someone else was contesting Mech Sorcerers meant that I probably couldn't find the 3-star Annie as quickly as I would have liked. So in that situation, when someone else is contesting all of the mechs, it's usually a good idea to say, okay, what else can I do in this situation? And in my situation, it was, okay, let's just get to level 8, and then we can start to worry about the 3 stars like the Syndra and the Annie. So you can see here, level 8, we are nowhere near a 3-star Annie, but we have transferred our items over to Syndra, who's 2-star. We've got all of the sorcerers, including a 2-star Vel'Koz online. So we're in the later stages of the game. We did lose a little bit making this transition, and obviously not having a 3-star Annie is going to hold back the power of our mech, but we do have a GA. We do have a Warmogs, which is a really good item combo for our mechs. But you can see I'm going up against someone playing, well, actually there were 3 people playing mechs in this game in its entirety. So there was a guy playing Mech Infiltrator, there was a guy playing Mech Sorcerer, and there was me also playing Mech Sorcerer. So going for a 3-star Annie probably would have been nigh on impossible in this game. So we've just continued to stack with the sorcerers here, and we're giving the Jeweled Gauntlet and the Seraphs over to Syndra. I would say Seraphs is one of the most important Syndra items you can get, because you want her to cast her ability as much as physically possible, and she's got quite a low mana threshold, so therefore Shojin's is not particularly strong on her, whereas just giving her straight up Seraphs is good. Alright, we're in the late game here, and you can see we've given a couple of random items over to our Vel'Koz. We've given a Thief's Gloves over to our Lux. Our Syndra has just randomly been given a Hextech Gunblade, which is fine, but we are going up against the only remaining chap in the game who is also running Mech Sorcerer, and you can see it's still a very close affair, but nonetheless, we do come out on top with also adding a Trap Claw over to our Sorcerer, our Mech as well, which actually makes him moderately strong, just because it's going to stun the first person to actually use a big ability on them, or most of the time it's a big ability anyway. But you can see no 3-star Annie, which is going to, I guess, limit the overall power of our mech. But we do manage to get through right at the end here versus this chap, and we end up getting the win, which is definitely needed to happen. We were very close to losing out on that one, but we did it, and we ended up getting the first place victory.